Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Doug Show. My name's Doug Cunnington, and in this episode, I am going to be answering a reader / listener / viewer question. So I take questions from all over the place, from my blog, Niche Site Project, from my YouTube channel. I think it's just called Doug Cunnington, but you could find it out there, or from the podcast. And this is a fairly common one, although it takes a little while for people to come around and ask this question. But here it is. When is it okay to decide that a site is not working out? So what can you do when you figure out that maybe this isn't working out? Or how do you know if a site isn't working out and never will? Or should you stick with it? So the reality of answering this question is it will be almost impossible to give a correct answer. There are just too many variables involved. There are too many different kind of sites, and it's just impossible to know if you are in a dip, or your site rather is in a dip, and if you just keep at it, it will work out, or if you truly should just move on. But instead of trying to answer the question accurately and exactly right for everyone, I'm just going to tell you some of my thoughts about, my experiences, like personally, and some of the observations that I've had, just auditing people's sites, looking at sites that didn't work out for a while, and then maybe they did, that sort of thing. So that's how we're going to tackle it today. Hopefully you'll be able to, see some of the common characteristics that I'm going to describe, and maybe some of the feelings that you're having as you're working through it. And maybe it'll bring you a little bit more clarity, I hope. Before I get too deep into the details here and start answering the question, I want to just tell you to check out nichesiteproject.com. If you haven't yet, I highly encourage you to sign up for the email list, where I will share a lot of templates with you, like right off the bat. In that first email, I send you basically all the templates that I use. I update them over time, and generally those are going to be pretty accurate, at least as a starting point. Additionally, check out my YouTube channel, where you can find a bunch of tutorials. There are a lot of Q&A type live streams that I do. Those could drag on for an hour to, some of them have been like 2 hours long when I apparently didn't have all that much to do, or maybe I was just super enjoying answering those questions. And there are teardowns, tutorials, and all sorts of other videos, including some like vlogs where maybe I'm on vacation or something like that, or I'm just rambling on like a crazy person. So do check those out, and I would appreciate it if you did. All right, on to the questions here. So I should, give you an idea of, my experience. I started creating niche sites and like online businesses, I guess, starting in 2013. And since then, if I had to, I don't keep a tally, but if I had to guess, I've probably started between, say, 20 and 40 different sites. That is just kind of off the top of my head. So quite a few, right? Few dozen, but not an insane amount, but quite a few. And I can tell you that only a very small number of those ended up being like successful at all. The good part is you don't need that many to be successful. You just need like 1 or 2 wins. That's it. And then once you have that, you're okay. So it's a pretty poor percentage when you look at it, but over time I've gotten better, and the win percentage goes up. And basically I've realized that the fewer things that I am working on, the better I do on the things that I am working on. So keep that in mind as well. When I first started, I think probably the first 3 to 5 sites that I created weren't that great. So I made the mistake, like a lot of people do, where once I figured out that I could host a WordPress site and then host multiple sites on my hosting account that I've already paid for, that I started buying like domain names for ideas that I had that I was going to get around to sometime in the future, which I never did, by the way. A lot of those just sat there idle for a year, and then I just didn't do anything with it. Or even worse, I published like 3 or 4 articles on a site and then didn't do anything. So I ended up wasting a little money and time trying to work on those projects. So the point is, I had a few sites like right at the beginning that didn't do much. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that nowadays, if you start a new site, like generally, it's probably going to be about 6 months before you're like making any sort of significant money, which I will just say that that's about $100 per month. For most people, if you can make $100 per month, if you tell your friends about it, if you tell your spouse, your family, friends, your partner, if you tell someone you're making $100 a month relatively passively, that's cool. Like people like that. Like $100 a month, you could do something with, right? You potentially, depending on how you vacation, but you could potentially take a vacation on the $1,200, right? Maybe a long weekend and like really, really do some cool stuff. Or, if you're more economic or you have hotel points or whatever, you could go on vacation for like a couple weeks, right? So there's a lot of factors involved, but $100 a month is what I would consider significant. So the point is, it's going to take probably 6 months before you're making much money. And what I can tell you also is you're going to be investing over that 6 months. So it's probably going to be at least a few $100s of just investment. So you're going to have to spend money on hosting. You'll have to spend it potentially on content, maybe some tools like keyword research tools, that sort of thing. You can use a lot of free things, but many times if you pay for a tool, something like SEMrush or KW Finder or a premium theme, you'll be able to get more work done in a shorter amount of time and potentially have that work that you've done like be a little bit more accurate and a little bit more effective. So using tools, even if it's expensive, isn't always a bad idea if you eventually get the ROI from it. Now, of course, the hard part is you don't know which pieces are really going to provide the ROI, but if you could save time in general, that's a really good thing. So a keyword research tool typically is going to be able to save you a lot of time, especially with like competition analysis. So again, a tool like KW Finder is really going to be helpful. So that said, I'm just going to quickly summarize. I've had a bunch of sites that didn't work out that well. If you end up in that position, that's fine. You only need 1 or 2 to work out, and then you're in great shape. And then the other thing is if you're in that first 6-month period, you potentially could be in the Google sandbox. If you're brand new to SEO, making money online, affiliate sites, ad-based sites, if you're brand new to this area, then your learning curve could be a little bit higher, right? Or a little bit steeper. So it could take you a little while to figure things out. So even if you've made it through the sandbox period, it may take you just a little bit longer. So those are a couple things to note. Now, moving on to the part where it's like, should you give up? Should you move on? How can you figure that out? So number one, I'm going to assume that you've been doing a relatively good job executing a process, right? So hopefully you've had some guidelines on like what to do and when, so you have a relatively good idea on where you should be spending your time and the steps that you should be executing. If you've just been randomly doing things where maybe you're following a bunch of people online, this is super common, right? I did this. So if you're following a bunch of people online and everyone has a little bit of a different strategy and you're sort of piecemeal picking things to execute and try out and see if it works for you, that may or may not work out. Now, the risk is you could be picking the things that aren't very effective, or maybe you're missing a piece of the puzzle in that particular strategy. Now, if you follow just one person, which I recommend, whether it's me or someone else or a different, just methodology, it's a good idea to kind of stick with one methodology, one framework, all the way from the beginning till the end, so that you can kind of figure out how that one works. Now, obviously, it's very important to pick pick that framework or pick the person that you're following to you got to make sure that person is like getting the job done, right? You got to make sure that person has a good framework. If you pick a bad framework and you do it, then it's not going to work out for you. So the point is, find someone who actually knows what they're doing so that you'll be able to execute what they say and get good results. So, little example, one of the reasons why I freely give away the keyword golden ratio, right? KGR. And it was a very hard decision, by the way, but I knew that if people tried the keyword golden ratio and it worked, they would probably trust me, right? They would probably trust the other things that I'm telling them too. And if it actually works, they will probably tell other people as well. And it's been a slow grind, but over time, people have discovered, like by testing the keyword golden ratio, that it actually works, and it works pretty well across the board, across different industries, across different kind of sites and everything. So it's been, one of the best marketing things I could do is just to give away the best idea that I've had. So that said, you got to make sure that you're following a process that works. Otherwise, it's just not going to work, just by definition, right? So you got to make sure you're following something that's going to work. So if you're following a process that should work because it is actually effective, it's from a reputable person or company or whatever, and it's still not working out, you're not getting the traffic that you expect, you're not getting the earnings that you expect, you should probably find someone who has more experience than you to have a look at your site. Now, you can hire someone, right? So I do this for some people if I really think that I could help them out, but you can hire me to like audit your site, right? So I can go through, give you some idea about my impression. I can look at some keywords for you and just evaluate what you're doing and whether it's going to work or not. I can only tell you what I know based on my experience and that sort of thing. But if you can get someone who knows more than you, that has at least a couple more years of experience than you do, it's probably really valuable feedback. And me personally, I charge, at least at the time that I'm recording this, like $250 per hour. So $250 for like an hour of like one-on-one time. But I can tell you for a fact that if you are spending a lot of time on your site and you're investing in it, generally the $250 is going to be cheaper than you continuing to spend time on something that is not going to work or anything like that. Not a sales pitch. I don't do many of these. I actually turn most people away that ask about this sort of an audit because I can point them towards like free information, other resources that I've already created, and just save them the money, point them in the right direction. And if they still have questions, and maybe I do this session, but the point is you don't have to hire me, right? You can also potentially find people in like a Facebook group, although I don't really like Facebook groups, but you may be able to find like a knowledgeable, more experienced person who is very helpful, and perhaps they have more time than me, right? So, part of it is because I have a blog and a platform and all that stuff, I get many requests to review sites, and I just can't do it, right? I don't have enough time in the day to review people's sites for free. So to, curb the demand, I charge for it, right? So, and, to be honest with you, if I were to do it for free, actually, you know what? I learned this the hard way, right? So I used to, back in the day, a while back, a couple years ago, I would actually look at someone's site and give them tips and say, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And then you know what they would do? Nothing. They wouldn't do a damn thing. So I would waste my fucking time, give them tips, and then they wouldn't do it. And basically, it was just wasting my time. So the moral of the story, I'm going on a rant here. Thank you for indulging me. The point is, if someone pays for a service, they're more likely to take it seriously than if I just show up and give, free information to someone and then they don't do anything with it because they didn't pay for it. So if you have some skin in the game, you will actually pay attention. So moving on, the point that I'm trying to make is you should have someone with more experience have a look at your site. Potentially they can give you tips, right? They can give you tips. They could tell you, hey, you actually went after a bad keyword. This is an area where the products are way too cheap and the commission rate's too low. So it's going to be really hard for you to make money in that way. Another insight a person may have is maybe if you shift it over to an information-based site, and you don't worry about the affiliates, like products and affiliate reviews, then maybe you're going to be able to, pivot, keep your same domain, keep the same topic. You can repurpose the content. There are a lot of options out there, and you may just not be aware of them yet. So again, very, very valuable to, seek help, seek an expert's opinion to save you time. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there who actually don't have, they don't have the resources to pay for an expert to have a look. And that's fair. So again, that's why, maybe you can get help from someone that doesn't charge. But at the same time, you may be giving up some confidentiality on your site. Again, if you're not paying, then who knows what they're going to do with the information that they get from you, right? But at the same time, it could be valuable if you don't have any other options. The next thing you can look at is the competition. So if you can go and research and find competitors who are out there that are, by the evidence that you could find, they're making it work out and they are making money, they're getting traffic on their site, and generally you think it's profitable, then you know that it is possible in that particular niche. Then from there, I'll backtrack in a second, but from there, you can sort of reverse engineer what is working for competitors and then see where the gaps are. So this is sort of a classic like gap analysis and competition analysis exercise. So now that I'm saying it out loud, it totally reminds me of my consulting days where a company would hire consultants to come in, do an evaluation on like the current state of where things are, have a look at some competition, and then provide a gap analysis so that decisions could be made on the direction that the company wants to go to, or the direction that they want to go in rather. So the point here is really around finding what's working for your competitors and then figuring out what you need to do. So in this scenario, I would recommend a tool like SEMrush to check out your competitors, what keywords they're potentially ranking for based on like real actual data. You can get an estimation of the traffic that they're getting, and from that you can have a pretty good understanding if are they ranking for like keywords that are affiliate oriented and they're probably making money. You can use those estimates as a pretty good gauge. Now, it's not going to be 100% accurate. And if you have a site that is getting traffic, then, you could easily, check and see like, what does SEMrush estimate the traffic to be and what you actually get. And usually sites are getting more traffic. If I just had to guess, sometimes it's, 30% more traffic up to like 3 to 4x more traffic, depending on the number of long tail keywords that they're ranking for. So, that said, you can get an idea like, are sites in this niche, in this category, are they actually getting a lot of traffic, or is everyone getting a small amount of traffic? So once you have that sort of idea, you can see like, oh, other people are doing it. That means I can do it. Now, you do have to execute the gap analysis part. So at that point, you have to look at the content they have, the quality of the content, like the amount of content, the length, all on page SEO, ideas there. But you can go look and get a pretty good idea of what they're doing. The next thing that you would want to do is have a look at the backlinks that they have. So again, SEMrush is a good tool to use for that. If you have access to like Ahrefs or Ahrefs, as I guess they're calling it now, Ahrefs is very good as far as backlink analysis. So you can see, do they have a ton of backlinks or just a few? If you're probably going to find areas where, there are pretty big gaps, whether it's in the content, the quality of the content, or in the backlink profile. So you could figure out, like, is this something that I can emulate? Can I, slice this down to a small scale so that I can execute on like a small little test and see if I can maybe get traffic to 1 or 2 posts. And then from there, you can expand based on what's working versus what's not working. So pretty straightforward. Like once you say it out loud conceptually, look at the competition. Are other people doing it? If so, what are they doing? What are they doing with their on-site SEO? What are they doing with their off-site SEO? Obviously, it gets complicated really quick, but at that point, like you have an understanding, like, is this possible or is this like too much? Am I in over my head? Now, what you may find out, and this is the case where you would bail, is if you find a couple sites that are competitors that seem to be, executing well as far as like the content that they have on their site. And if you find that they aren't even ranking well and no one is in that particular category, then it's probably a no-go. However, if you find that there are a handful that are getting quite a bit of traffic, that's probably a good sign. So if other people are doing it, it means you can too. And it's just a matter of figuring out like what to do. Now, finally, like if you're going down this route and it looks like, you're not in a niche that is going to get much traffic, or maybe the competitors are just like really, really amazing and you're not going to be able to do much with them, you may need to bail. So there's a couple options when you want to bail. One would be potentially just selling your site, right? Selling your site maybe on Flippa, maybe to a private individual, but that is not without its downside. So unless you're skilled in like migrating a site and taking care of like all the loose ends that are very apparent once you start trying to migrate a site, if you're not skilled in that, you may want to just not do it, or work with a broker. Now, the thing is, a broker probably needs you to have a site that's making pretty good money. Typically, they're going to take a percentage. So working with a broker may not really be an option. Flippa is, an option for sites that aren't making any money. And it could be that you're able to find someone that, sees something in your site. Maybe they have a similar site, or maybe it just fits what they're looking for some reason or another, and you could sell it to them. But again, like I said, there's a whole migration from like, your hosting to their hosting, transferring the domain name and all that stuff. So if that sounds scary to you, you may not want to get into it. Technically, it's not that crazy, not that difficult if you've done it before. But if you haven't, it can get messy pretty quick. And, when you're dealing with Flippa and you're dealing with money and escrow and all that stuff, there's just a lot of moving pieces where at some point you may just want to like move on. So this is maybe your second option here, just to eat the sunk cost and just move on. So the funny thing with sunk cost, which I should do a whole episode on sometime, is you've already spent the money. Yet we're hanging on to it, whatever it is, even though it would actually be better off for you to just move on and just like lose the money. So let's just make up some examples. Let's say you've invested $1,000 over the past, 18 months on a site, and you're trying to figure out whether or not you should work on this new site, which you've already started, and things are sort of working out well, or if you should split your time like you have been by working on this old site that doesn't seem to be working out, and also working on your new site, which seems to be working out. And you may think, oh man, I invested that $1,000 over the past 18 months. I have been working on it. I spent so much time on it, hundreds of hours, and I really hate to just throw it away. But it turns out it may actually be better for you just to throw it away. Just get rid of the content, let the domain expire, just move on and work on that new site. Because the thing is, like, you're splitting your attention, you're splitting your time. And if you focus on the one site, you may be better off. Typically, when I've talked to people who really are doing well, a lot of times they started doing even better when they, cut off projects that were okay. They cut off their projects that were good, but not great. And then they only worked on the great things. It's really hard to do. And I know a lot of people out there maybe are shaking their heads at me. Maybe you're yelling at me through through the speaker. But I mean, it's really hard to move on. But a lot of times moving on is just better. So leave those sunk costs behind and just move on to the next thing that's working out a little better. Maybe you can, figure out the lessons you learned through, the project that didn't work out, and moving on will be even better. You'll start working on something that has more traction. Maybe you already have a site that has more traction, and moving on to that, you'll be a little bit more motivated. You're not going to be wasting, your time on this, project that has all these sunk costs. So again, I say that, and I've had a really hard time letting go myself. So one strategy you may be able to use, which I've done personally, is not to cut it off completely, but to just let it sit. And effectively, I've cut off some projects. These are, sites that I've started, loaded them up with content, and I've just let them sit. And I was thinking, hey, I can always come back in 6 months whenever I do have time. You never have time, by the way. So, 6 months turns into 18 months, turns into 3 years. And at that point, you have an aged site, which you actually can come back to at some point if you want to. Or, I may actually get rid of some of these, projects that I haven't touched in a while. But the point is you could move on without actually killing them completely, if that makes sense. So I've done that where I just let them sit. So if you can't take my advice, I can't take my own advice, right? I get the irony there, but you could effectively stop working on something so that you can spend your time on the things that really are more effective. So the other thing that the sub question that the person asked is around how to make some money back so that maybe you can, at least not lose everything. So depending on where, the site came from, if it's like a site that you created from scratch, it may be a little tough to sell it out there. But, flip it could be an option. One thing you could do if you happen to have purchased a done-for-you site, which I know a lot of people out there have purchased done-for-you sites, you may be able to go back to the broker that you purchased it from and potentially sell it back, right? So if you bought a site and it really didn't catch on for you, you may be able to sell it back to the broker that sold it to you. So I haven't heard anyone specifically do this, but the thing that I know, because I recently purchased an aged site, is that people sell aged sites. So there's value in having the, content out there for a while, potentially some backlinks. You've actually tried to work on it, and you may be able to get a pretty good, maybe not a profit, but you may be able to reclaim a lot of the money that you spent by selling it back to whoever you bought it from. Now, like I said, I've never heard of an example of that, but it would be worth a shot. And generally, a company that is selling done-for-you sites doesn't want you to be unsuccessful, so they may lend a hand, give you a little bit more support. Maybe you didn't get enough support, or maybe you didn't ask for enough support initially, but it's worth it to check, right? There's no harm in asking that company if they want to purchase the site back. And like I said, I'm doing this case study where I just purchased an age site, and I'll be, doing the typical stuff that I talk about, keyword research, adding content, adding backlinks to see how quickly an age site will, start making money and how quickly it can grow. So I'm very interested to, get rolling with that. The time that I'm recording this right now, I have just purchased it. The site's being migrated over to my hosting, and I'm going to be, starting to work on it very soon here. So if I'm going to round out this sort of meandering episode, basically, you can potentially try and sell a site on, a marketplace like Flippa, or you could try and sell it back to a broker. And maybe if you've figured out that, the site isn't going to go anywhere by talking to an expert, maybe you just need to move on, let the site go away. It's a sunk cost. It's in the past, and you could move forward with what you've learned and work on a site that maybe is getting more traction for you right now, or just to move on and start a new site again with more knowledge than you had before. I think it could be very important to, get the input of someone more experienced so you can, hopefully not make the same mistakes. Surely you've made some observations yourself on things that you can do better, but it's always good to have a second or third pair of eyes, looking at something so that you can get other opinions out there. And by the way, that's another great reason to have a mastermind group, so that you have people that you can, talk to about these sort of ideas and to give you inputs from a different perspective. So I've rambled on a lot. And if you have questions yourself, you can reach me. I don't have the phone number right here, but you could check the show notes. You could actually leave a voicemail, and I will play it on the air, probably, if you want me to. Or you could shoot me an email at feedback@doug.show. We will catch you next time. I hope you found this episode helpful, and have a great day. All right, thanks a lot for joining me on The Doug Show. I really do appreciate you taking the time. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. I have a ton of other episodes out there covering lots of different topics. Sometimes I just tell stories. If you are a longtime listener, I appreciate you too. If you haven't left a review, that is awesome, because now you have an opportunity to leave a review, and that would be totally cool, and I would really appreciate it. If you're looking to get started with affiliate marketing or making money online or anything like that, you should go over to nichesiteproject.com. That is my blog. Once you're over there, you just click the green button, enter your name and email address, and then I'll send you a bunch of cool stuff. I'll send you templates, some motivational emails, and I think there's probably just some random emails that I send out there also. So we'll catch you next time on The Doug Show. Thanks.